The Pokedex can be a wealth of knowledge for any Pokemon fan, and while it's become popular to look at for its darker entries, there is so much more to the Pokedex than just that. That's why today, we're going to be looking at some fun secrets and Easter eggs that can be found within the Pokedex entries of various Pokemon. So without further ado, let's get to it. Friendly reminder to you all, just so you know, I am doing a Pokemon Scarlet and Violet giveaway. For every 3,000 new listeners I can get on my Spotify, which is filled with all my Pokemon remixes, I will be giving away a copy of the games. So check that out if you're able to, because it also supports the channel greatly and is super appreciated, so thank you to everyone who already listens, and who knows, maybe you'll win a free game in the process. Getting into the Pokedex entries though, let's begin with Latios and Latias. In these Pokemon's Dex entries, it's mentioned how they dislike fighting and are highly sensitive to the emotions of people. When looking at this straight on, it doesn't seem like much more than a bit of background info, but if you think about it, this might actually be why Latias and Latios first appear in the post-game of Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, because that is when all of the fighting between Team Magma and Team Aqua has ended, and therefore the duo are now comfortable enough to roam around the region. This could just be a coincidental connection, but it's pretty cool and fitting either way, in my opinion. One set of Pokemon that has often been connected to Latias and Latios are the Togepi family. This is due to their similar blue and red triangular markings, but within the Pokedex, this connection actually goes a bit deeper. In Togekiss's Dex entries, it mentions essentially the same thing as the entries of the Eon duo, that it dislikes fighting and it will never appear where there is strife. This seems to confirm that some kind of connection between these Pokemon does in fact exist, which is fascinating, but it also explains why the Togepi line are so rare in the games they appear in, which is a very somber and sad detail. Next up, let's take a look at Gollurk. Gollurk has a fairly interesting Dex entry from Pokemon Ultra Moon, which states, when the seal on its chest is removed, it rages indiscriminately, turning the whole town around it into a mountain of rubble. Much like the aforementioned Dex entries, this might just seem like a generic background detail at face value, but also just like those other entries, it might also have more to it as well. That's because in the very next generation after this Dex entry was published, in Pokemon Sword and Shield, Gollurk's pre-evolution, Golett, can be found in the wild on Route 8, which just so happens to feature a crumbled, destroyed town, quite literally illustrating Gollurk's Ultra Moon Dex entry and possibly being a pretty cool intentional connection. Swinging back around to Gen 3, we are now going to take a look at Volbeat. Now, this Pokemon is famously seen as one of the more forgettable ones, but this detail that I'm about to share with you about it might just give it a little more appeal. In Volbeat's Dex entries, it talks about how its tail lights up at night, which, given that Volbeat is based on a firefly, is pretty expected and not really at all special. However, in addition to a firefly, Volbeat is also based on a greaser, which you can see in Volbeat's big collar as well as its pose, and this greaser inspiration might even connect to Volbeat's Dex entries as well for a really cool full circle moment. That's because greasers are stereotypically seen as the troublemaking type. The type of people who come out at night to make mischief, just like how Volbeat appears at night with its tail lit up. So theoretically, Volbeat might not just be a Firefly with a random Greaser inspiration thrown in, but instead it might be a Firefly Greaser because Fireflies come out at night just like troublemakers do, such as Greasers, which, in my opinion, gives Volbeat a super cool extra layer of meaning to its design and makes it all the cooler, regardless if this was the intent or not. However, you can't talk about Volbeat without talking about Ilomize, and its dex entries bring out some possible extra layers to its design as well. With Volbeat as a greaser, Ilomize takes inspiration from flapper girls and possibly other similar women's subcultures, meaning that both of these Pokemon have that kind of cultural inspiration going for them. In Ilomize's dex entries, it mentions how it's able to attract swarms of Volbeat, and I can't help but feel like this ties into another part of these Pokemon's inspiration. Volbeat and Ilomize are obviously a pair, and as a pair, they are meant to work together thematically. So, with that in mind, and the mention of how Ilomize attracts Volbeat in its dex entry, and how Volbeat is based on a greaser, all of this might allude to the whole bad guy, good girl trope, where a tough, troublemaking guy gets involved in a relationship with a comparatively nice and sweet girl. This is a trope that was even famously showcased with a greaser in the movie Grease, meaning that these two could indeed be based on that whole dynamic, or who knows, are possibly even inspired by the movie itself, which I think makes these Pokemon way cooler than they actually appear on the surface. Speaking of movies, there are even more Pokemon out there, believe it or not, that make reference to classic films in their designs, and their Pokedex entries. For instance, Gligar is another one of these Pokemon, and while you might not see which movie it is based on at first glance, one of its dex entries provides a clue. In Pokemon Gold, Gligar's dex entry states that it flies straight at its target's face, then clamps down on the startled victim to inject poison. This is a direct reference to Gligar's inspiration, which is none other than the Facehugger from the Alien movie franchise. Moving along, we're gonna shift gears a little bit and highlight Arkhan. While many of Arkhan's dex entries state that it is the ancestor of all bird Pokemon, once we arrive at Pokemon Ultra Sun, things seem to have changed, as its dex entry in that game says, once thought to be the ancestor of all bird Pokemon, some of the latest research suggests that may not be the case. This is actually a direct reference to Arkhan's inspiration and what was known about it during the time frame of Gen 5, compared to the Ultra Sun and Moon days of Gen 7. Arkhan is based on the Archaeopteryx, a genus of dinosaurs that was once believed to be the oldest and first official bird. That is, until other bird-like dinosaurs were discovered that predate the Archaeopteryx. So not only is Arkhan based on this type of dinosaur, but its dex entries also reference the research that has gone into them in the years since, which is pretty cool and is a nice attention to detail. Since we're on the subject of birds, let's look at another Gen 5 bird, more specifically, Tranquil. Several of Tranquil's dex entries, including its white dex entry, state that many people believe that deep in the forest where Tranquil live, there is a peaceful place where there is no war. This is most likely a reference to the works of Japanese author Kenji Miyazawa. This is because Miyazawa often referred to a fictional land in his works known as Ihatove, which is a peaceful utopia just as Tranquil's dex entry describes. Additionally, this reference is likely because of the similarity between the spelling of Ihatove and Tranquil's Japanese name, Hatobo. Meanwhile, one game that Tranquil did not receive a Dex entry in is Pokemon Legends Arceus. This game, of course, features new Pokemon that exist within the past of the Pokemon world in Hisui, but seemingly died out in the modern day. Many have wondered what might have caused these Pokemon to die out, and very interestingly, a sort of retroactive explanation is given for Weirdeer in Stantler's Dex entries that dates all the way back to Gen 3. In Stantler's Ruby and Sapphire Dex entry, it states that Stantler's magnificent antlers were traded at high prices as works of art. As a result, this Pokemon was hunted close to extinction by those who were after the priceless antlers. With the knowledge we have now, this most likely means that Stantler stopped evolving into Weirdeer because Weirdeer naturally have even better antlers than Stantler, and therefore would have been hunted even more aggressively. So, the remaining Stantler that existed during this time period likely adapted by stunting their own growth so that they wouldn't evolve and therefore would be less likely to be hunted, effectively killing off Weirdeer as a species because the Stantler had no other choice. That's honestly pretty tragic, but it is cool that an explanation for the absence of this new Pokemon in the modern day has basically been sitting in the Pokedex this whole time. Also, shout out to Birdkeeper Toby for first picking up on this. He's awesome in case you didn't know, so go check him out. Finally, we've got one more Pokemon to highlight today, and it also hails from Johto. Polytode is an awesome split evolution of Poliwhirl that was introduced in this second generation, and in the Pokedex it's consistently mentioned that Polytode likes to sing. This trait most likely comes from actual frogs who sing to attract mates, but interestingly enough, this also contributes to a pretty significant media trope where frogs are often depicted as being musical. Everywhere from the classic Michigan J Frog, to the frogs in Meet the Robinsons, to even the frogs that appear in a couple of Legend of Zelda games, musical frogs are definitely a thing in media, and Polytode's Dex entries could potentially be in reference to this, in addition to the obvious real-world connections, which is pretty neat. Well, there you have it everybody. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, let me know your favorite Dex entry in the comments below, and subscribe if you're new for more content. I'll be back very soon with another video, and until then, as always, thank you all so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.